We will not work. Well, now you're starting to see something going on here that these captains of industry that looked so good a couple days ago are, you know, they're looking worse and worse for what they're doing to people. People were working long hours for low pay. They would get injured. I mean, if you cut off your hand working in one of these with one of these machines in a factory, they would look at you and say, "Well, can you still work?" And you say, "No, I lost my hand." And they're like, "Okay, you're fired." And then what are you supposed to do? And so people realized that this was wrong. This was not a good way to treat people, and that there had to be a better way. And so what ends up happening is that you start getting labor organized because individually a worker is very weak. You get the owner who controls the entire factory and can hire and fire whoever he wants. And so one worker is really powerless against that kind of power. But if all the workers got together and they told the owner, either do it this way or none of us will work, then what is the owner supposed to do? And so that's what we're going to start seeing here. Um, the country starts going railroad crazy, and too many railroads are built, and so uh, the country goes into a depression. We go through an economic downturn, and and so people are getting laid off. They're getting their salaries cut. They have to work harder for less money, and then at the same time, the B&O Railroad, Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, start giving out more money to their shareholders. Remember, we talked about shareholders, where somebody who invests in the company wants money back for their investment, and so they kept doing that. They kept giving people these dividends, these money paid back to investors, and the workers saw this like, wait, we're getting less money, and you're giving the rich people more money, and people got very, very upset. There was a depression going on, and let's just go through our vocabulary words. Depression, an economic period when many people cannot find work, prices drop, and there's very little trade or investment. Prices and wages, we should also put in there, drop. And so when this depression hits and everything starts getting bad, and workers are being treated worse and the rich people are still getting their money, they decide to strike. And what is a strike? An organized refusal to do work in order to bring about changes on the job. They want better treatment. And so in this great railroad strike of 1877, um, the management, the people that owned these railroads, asked state governors to bring out the militia. They did. And in Pittsburgh, these soldiers fired into a crowd, killing 20 people. And this just made it worse. But finally, U.S. soldiers were brought in. And, these are federal soldiers now, not just the state militia. And that ended the strike. But that was the beginning of problems between management and labor. And you could see here that the government favors management. They want the trains to run on time. They want the country to run well, especially in an economic downturn. And so they're going to favor the business people. And so the workers see that there's really no one to help them. The government's not going to step in and help them. The government's going to step in and help management. And so what they start to do is they start organizing into a labor union, which is a group of workers who have banded together to get better working conditions, higher wages, and shorter hours. And that's what we're seeing here with groups like the AFL, the American Federation of Labor. And the person that really gets it going in 1886 is Samuel Gompers. Now, that's a name that pops up because I remember a high school named Samuel Gompers that I used to play when I was in high school in baseball. And if I remember correctly, uh, well, anyway, yeah, so it's something that's familiar to me. And the AFL's first action was a national strike in order to get an 8-hour day. This is something we take for granted today, where it's standard 8 hours a day for people that work on a hourly salary. You get 8 hours a day, and if they want you to work more, then you get overtime. You get paid time and a half, let's say. And this is something that the AFL was looking to do to try to make sure that people don't get overworked, that they can actually enjoy their life a little bit with whatever money that they're making instead of just working to live, and then that's their whole life. So they used strikes, boycotts, negotiations, anything they could to get management to listen, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. Negotiations where you're talking to the management and say, hey, look, this isn't right. We need to do this. And if they didn't listen, then they would boycott their product, organize boycotts so nobody buys their product, or they would just simply strike and make sure that the business couldn't function. The strikes are dangerous, though, because everybody really loses in a strike. If the business loses money, then they can't pay their workers, and you kind of defeated the whole purpose. So that's really a last resort here, as we'll see how that can be a bad thing. But we have two more strikes here. The Homestead Strike of 1892, and this has to do with Andrew Carnegie, one of our captains of industry. He decided that he wasn't going to deal with the union anymore. And so the workers struck. Since they're part of a union and he doesn't want to have the union around, they went on strike and said, we're not going to work. And union blocked gates. There was violence and 8,000 troops. Remember, we talked about the government sides with management a lot of times. And so they came in to try to make sure that there wasn't any more violence. But after weeks without work, the strikers decided to give up, and they came back with even lower salaries, and their union was disbanded. Now they would work 12-hour shifts. This is Andrew Carnegie doing this to people. 12-hour shifts, day and nights, and this is one of the reasons why he was able to get so rich, because he was able to pay his workers less, get more out of them, and he broke the union. And once he did that, business for him was much, much better. The Pullman strike, going back to the railways, Chicago's Pullman Palace Car Company, their workers went on strike, and so they asked the other unions, the railroad American Railway Union, to support them, and so they did. They said, we're not going to work on any of the Pullman cars while they're on strike. And so this is the first time we start seeing these unions really working together with each other, not just individually. They knew that if they banded together, not just in one factory or one industry, but all across many industries, that they can get more results, and maybe management will start talking to them. And so shipping was disrupted. Farmers' crops started to rot because they couldn't move. And the government steps in again, sending soldiers again to run the trains. They were going to take over the jobs. And then when courts said that the strikers had to go back to work, they did, and the strike cost both sides millions of dollars. So it's really, you don't want to do that as a union, to go on strike. It's really a last resort when management is absolutely treating you terrible and you feel like you've got nowhere else to go. Then you go on strike. So those are the three main strikes that we'll be talking about here. Great Railroad Strike of 1877. That really got all this labor movement going. You've got the Homestead Strike, where Carnegie broke the union of the steel mills, and the Pullman Strike, where really nobody wins. But it's the first main time that all these unions start working together and they start seeing this success.